Well guys, I'm going to warn you in advance, not everyone will be happy with what I'm going to say. Normally I would go with a warning, unpopular opinion disclaimer, but unfortunately what I'm going to tell you is not going to be an opinion but facts. You see, over the couple of years, and especially over the past couple of months, we've seen an increasing amount of voices within the video gaming industry calling for an increase of the prices of video games. We've seen the executives of Rockstar say that GTA 6 should cost up to $150. More recently, we've seen Yves Guillemot, the CEO of Ubisoft, justify the price tag of Skull and Bones because according to him, his company's latest release is a quadruple A game. And quite frankly, despite all of the appreciation I have for Skull and Bones, I think that this is utter BS. Skull and Bones doesn't even close to being a AAA game. So this raises the question, why? Why do game companies push the narrative for an increase of the price of their video games? Why do they go as far as going for the most ridiculous excuses to try to make consumers accept this change? Well, I'm afraid that our culprit has got a name, and that name is inflation. You see, I remember a time when AAA games were priced at $49.99, basically $50. Back in 2000, at the time when some of you were not even born, a $50 game was considered expensive, but it wasn't unheard of. The 2000s were also a time when video gaming as a hobby became increasingly popular, and when what a video game should cost became imprinted within the collective memory. $20 to $30 for your regular indie game, $30 to $40 for a typical AA game, and up to $50 for the most upscale productions, prices that had remained the norm until recently. Unfortunately, that stagnation of prices has made it increasingly difficult for the video gaming industry to remain sustainable, and thus for several reasons. The first one is the price of games themselves. If we take a look at the official statistics, $50 in 2000 is the equivalent of $90 in today's money. I'm not making this up, it's information that you can find from the US administration on the internet. This explains why the price of a loaf of bread is no longer $1 but gets ever closer to $2. That is why the price of a family car is no longer $20,000 but closer to $35,000. So then, why have the prices of video games stagnated, and why is it no longer possible for them to do so? Well, the first point I'll bring here is delocalization. To keep prices at the same level, game studios had to find ways to cut costs, and one way to do so is by relocating game studios where they're cheaper to operate, whether it's because of tax benefits, government subsidies, or cheaper labor. Unfortunately, inflation keeps on rising, and cost-cutting via relocalization eventually shows its limits. So, how do game studios cut costs? Well, they use tried and proven tech over and over again, saving considerable costs in game development, something that was very obvious with Starfield, for example, which heavily relies on Bethesda tech the studio used for their previous games. Star Wars Squadrons, which was made of Star Wars Battlefront 2 space mode, Red Dead Redemption 2, which is just GTA 5 but in the Far West, or even Frontier's Planet series, which uses Elite Dangerous's Cobra engine. And when using the same tech over and over again is not enough, game studios are going to release sequels after sequels of the same IP, turning what should normally be updates or maybe DLCs into full-priced releases. The reality is that game development, especially if we're talking about AAA games, is expensive. Game studios have salaries to pay, and unlike the prices of games, those really have to catch up with the inflation because otherwise those who work in the industry will simply seek work somewhere else. Real estate also becomes more expensive, and with that, the price of rent. That is why innovation and new IPs are so rare these days and usually come from indie or solo developers who sometimes don't even pay themselves during the process of game development, or established and successful developers like Rockstars who have the treasury and the fan base to be able to afford the cost of developing something new, or via crowdfunding when publishers would normally finance or back a studio for trying something new but Now they don't do that anymore, so that's why studios have to resort to crowdfunding, and that is not always even guaranteed to be successful. Look at Star Citizen, for example, which despite earning over $100 million per year now and earning a little over $100 per account, still struggles to make a profit and only has kept a fraction of the $600 million it earned, the rest having been spent in game development. There is one more reason that explains why the price of games has stagnated, and I kept it for the end here because it will be linked to my conclusion later, and that is the fact that the video gaming industry is more competitive than it has ever been, and if the traditional actors of the industries won't maintain their prices to the current levels, others will. If that wasn't much of a problem 20 years ago, as Chinese and Eastern Europeans were not considered serious competition, the situation has since changed, and lately we've seen some really good games from Poland, Ukraine, Czechia, and China too. Gone is the time when we were laughing at Playway's jokes of games or Chinese rip-offs. Now the developers of these countries are also able to create their own IPs with their own techs and have proven that they can get it right and at the traditional prices. However, even producing in cheaper countries has its limits, as they too, even more so than more developed countries, have to deal with inflation and an ever-increasing cost of living, and slowly but surely, gradually are catching up with our standards of living when that is not already the case. That is why we are now at this point when publishers and studios alike are pushing for players to accept higher prices for games. There is only so much game companies can do to keep prices the way they've been, and just like most goods see their prices inflate over time, so should games, unfortunately. Let's be honest, guys, game companies have made an amazing job at keeping the prices low, but even at $70 for a AAA game, that is still much cheaper than the $90 equivalent of 2000's price. AAA games may have cost $50 when we were young, but 20 years have passed and it's time to grow up and accept that our favorite hobby has to deal with cost increases. Am I enjoying to say that? No. Do I rejoice at the idea of paying more for my games? No, but a future in which making games is only viable in China because their government would subsidize their industry as a means of soft power is definitely not something that we'd like to see. If paying $70 can, for the time being, guarantee innovation and creativity, then compared to the $90 that it could be, then it's not such a bad deal. Now the next question would be the following: will game studios keep their end of the bargain and deliver experiences that we ought to be expecting for that price tag? Well, subscribe to the channel to find out. Our next video should be the full review of Skull and Bones, that game that Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot called a quadruple A game, remember? Well, we will see if we are starting on here with a good start or not. This is now the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please let me know with a thumbs up and let me know how much you would be willing to pay for a AAA game. I'd love to read what you guys have to say on the topic. I wish you all a wonderful day, take care everyone, and I'll see you guys in the next one.